Hello and welcome to CLEA'S WORLD. Today I'll be sharing with you more on the information I've received from Source during my last QHHT Hypnosis session. I'll be reading from a transcript of the session, and when I refer to Lorrayne, I'm speaking of my practitioner who's asking the questions I prepared in advance of the session. And when I refer to me, I'm speaking of myself under hypnosis, which means the answers are coming from Source. So without further ado, let's get started. Lorrayne. The game is going to be very different for our brothers and sisters in the 3D chambers now that there is no team of the dark there. While we know that we all have light and dark inside of us, isn't the point of the matrix to have both teams playing together at any given time? Surely the alien planets that have set up the 3D chambers also have a team of the dark operating in their civilization. Me. Yes, and they do. Yeah, and they absolutely do. Because again, it's always the teams, the two teams that set up to be on a planet. Because otherwise there would be no fun, no interest to a game. So absolutely. Of course, they're not going to be out of balance. So it's going to be quite pleasant and quite fun, quite entertaining. And yes, in the chambers, there will not be a team of the light, a team of the dark kind of thing. But it's fine because again, these chambers are being set up to where life resembles what we had here. Of course, with much better systems. And truly, how do we at this level, at 3D level, how do we perceive that there is too much darkness? Really, what we're looking at, because of course we always tell ourselves that we don't feel anything, we're just looking at things in a 3D way, or at least this is how most people wanted to look at the game, because that's the point of the game, for this to be real. So how did we perceive that there was an imbalance of darkness? Because of the systems. What are we able to do? What are we free to do? What do we need to do to survive? That's how we perceive how much freedom we have, how the society works. This is what we call when we say, oh, there's a lot of darkness, without even going into the concepts we've explained over time, right? And so the same thing is happening in the chambers. They look at their system, they're like, this is good, and that's all. It's a balanced reality. So they wouldn't question themselves because they're not aware of these concepts at a 3D level, at a game level. They're not aware of these concepts that we have communicated. So they're not telling themselves, oh, where's the vibration here? Where's the balance of vibration? Of course, they might talk about vibration because there are going to be people talking. There are people talking about spirituality, just like they were doing the same thing here. And they believe they're still here, even though they believe that they are a different generation from the one that was here. But they do believe they're here. The whole point of the chambers is to resemble planet Earth. But they don't have the dark operating. They just have the systems that work a certain way. And they will still bring in information, spirituality that looks a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. They also have, again, they have spirituality. So not religion per se, because religion has been such a system of the dark. So that's not being set up. And so that's how we know that there is no darkness there. But think about it. Even the civilizations that have set these up, they do have dark in them, which means even these systems were set up by keeping that balance, the same balance that they have on the planet. They thought, here's how we would like a planet to look like, and this is how they created the chambers, because they had to come up with all new systems. Of course, they didn't just resemble the ones we had here because they were so dark here. They didn't set up the government and paying taxes again, for example, and Source was chuckling. We already discussed some of these details, but just to say, look at it this way. You were mentioning, Lorrayne, which was a very astute observation that you were mentioning before we started the call, that we are here now without the dark. The only essences left here are of the light and people going to new earth. So how are we functioning? We are of the light and we're intending things of the light, but we're still keeping the veil in place. What is the veil? It's this appearance. So we have an appearance of the system being the same as before. This is the only reason why it even looks like we still have the dark here. So you see, at the end of the day, it's just a system that we want to continue supporting. It's not about having the dark or not having the dark. So the dark is gone, and still we are living as if we had the dark here because nothing has really changed in our perception. Of course, it has changed, but we're talking in broad terms. Nothing has really changed in our perception of how the world works. Even though we know perfectly well, the second we start looking a little bit more closely, that the entire world has changed, even from a 3D perspective. And we were just discussing this with systems changing completely. Now, we're not going to change them absolutely 100% because, again, we don't want to do this work. And also because we do need to cause as little panic among the NPCs as possible. But at the end of the day, the substance has greatly changed. And we know that the 3D systems are strained and we are holding them up by a hair because we require them to stay up. But the fact is, when you start looking into each system, you realize they don't have people, they don't have resources, lots of issues. A lot of companies that are huge and seemed untouchable just a few years ago, they are this close to collapse. And so when we say, YouTube has already gone down, Facebook has already gone down, the truth is, if you were to look at it even from a 3D perspective, you realize all the things have changed. We know for a fact, for example, that Facebook has had to let go of multiple waves of thousands of people. We don't question it. We pretend, oh, okay, yeah, sure, it's normal. Is it normal? Is it? If we look hard enough, if we look with interest in wanting to find, of course, we will see that nothing is normal right now. But we don't want that. I mean, look at what a joke. We're keeping stuff. We're doing the least possible to keep reality looking a certain way. We have a complete deja vu. Claire was laughing about it just this morning. Claire never pays attention to these things, but she heard that. And I won't say these names, but they are the two candidates for the upcoming election. We'll call it championship in the US. And they are Mr. B, who is the current champion, and Mr. T, who is the ex-champion. Okay. All right. So Claire never pays attention to these things, but she heard that Mr. B and Mr. T are running again. If this is not barely keeping reality in place without wanting any new nonsense coming up, as Claire likes to call it, nonsense, then she doesn't know what is. It's literally a deja vu. Who would have ever thought that we still have an actor playing Mr. B? Because it's like having a president who's going to be 100 years old. Source was laughing. But we don't want to change anything. That's fine. The guy is, everybody knows that he's not mentally healthy, and we're still pushing him for president. And everybody thinks nothing of it. It's totally normal. And Mr. T again, Source was cracking up here. My goodness, it's hilarious, you see, because we are not willing to do anything new. We don't even find excitement in having new people. We just wanted to say exactly the way it is because we don't care. We don't care the way it is. Nothing is coming from them changing anything. We are changing things. There's no NPC changing things. In the Telegram group, somebody was talking about the fact that there was a movie that Mr. O, who was also an ex-champion, made last year. And then that's why we're having, we had the boat taking down the bridge. Of course, it's known that it wasn't the boat that took down the bridge, but the whole appearance. And now they're talking about cyber attacks, etc. Let's remember things. Let's lay out the facts correctly. They've been talking about cyber attacks forever, at least for 10 years, as far as Claire remembers. Why? Because we like the fear. And once we started putting things online and depending more and more on online exchanges, of course, what is the most fear thing? OMG, I'm going to lose my internet. And now, because there's money involved, OMG, we're not going to be able to do transactions, right? So nothing is new. So Mr. O did the movie. Mr. O has been gone for a long time. So the dark, again, there is no dark. The NPCs that were part of the dark, what are they doing? This is how they give you an idea, and all of a sudden, everybody's responding. You have the whole conspiracy theorist group that is saying, well, this is what's happening. It's coming. Again, you see, because we play the same game. And Claire was part of this group too. So this is not a judgment. There is no judgment. This is the game. This was the game. There was one side and the other. Both played the same game. Let's spread this fear. Let's make it look like, ooh, because we have fun doing these things, like going to the movies and watching a thriller. Whoa, I wonder what's going to happen. But it's really not high vibration, is it? And it's not really real, is it? So now we saw one accident happen. Again, it wasn't an accident, but we saw one incident, we should call it. One incident happen. And all of a sudden we're like, oh no, we need to worry about this. Of course, Claire doesn't worry, doesn't care. She's bored out of her mind. She really wouldn't even know about these things. She barely found out that supposedly there is a new competition happening. And again, it's these two guys, and that was it. It's all she heard and all she wanted to know, because it doesn't matter. It's all the same. Claire is actually much more interested in what is happening in her own life right now, because again, we have assimilated, we've integrated everything. We are past many things from the project perspective. And therefore, this is actually more interesting right now than it has been in a long time. What is interesting is how we are changing reality. not the leftover things that we keep in place because we don't have enough interest in even making them look more realistic. What would have been more realistic? To actually have somebody come in and take Mr. B's place when we know from a 3D perspective that Mr. B is not mentally there? Do you see how ridiculous this is? It's like we have no interest whatsoever anymore. If we could have Mr. B and Mr. T run for the next 20 elections, say we were to be here for 20 elections, we would let it happen. As long as people are okay with it, think that that's normal, it's fine. The NPCs are okay, it's fine. We don't really want to think about it, and that's what's happening. And I have to tell you guys, this kind of really brought the reality of things home for me because it is ridiculous. If we were to bet on who would have run this time, I don't think anybody would have bet on those two guys running again, both of them at the same time. So it's quite interesting. Lorrayne, I'm right there with Clea. Okay, next question. You said the team of the dark went back to their planets and remembered their lives on old Earth. Why didn't reptilians just go to the equivalent of a 3D chamber on a reptilian planet so they could believe that what they did here was done by a previous generation and not have the guilt association with their actions? And just as a reminder, this is what the people going to 3D chambers, our brothers and sisters, chose for themselves. They went to the 3D chambers and they completely forgot that it was them here. So they believe they are another generation, say 50 years from now. And so they had nothing to do with what happened here, because that's an easier way to continue the game without having to think about all these things and be aware that you're the one that did, whatever it is that we went through the past few years. Me. Yes, because they truly wanted to go back to their planets, first of all. And these civilizations didn't want to set up chambers. They really just wanted, there was a healing process that needed to happen. So we didn't want just the same kind of game going on. The dark chose to handle what has happened a little bit the same way that we will handle what has happened on New Earth when we go to New Earth. We also could have gone to 3D chambers, of course, but we chose not to. So we decided that it is more beneficial to actually come to terms with what has happened and then move on, integrate it and move on. And we have said many times, the team of the dark has played a really pivotal role in many of these things, in much of this process. And they wanted it to the same extent we have wanted it. Not because, again, we think of it here as, well, they are the winning team. Why would they want to go? Because all of us were losing. All of us did not have fun. All of us were trapped, quote unquote. And so they wanted to move and remember because they really just want to move on, and they will. We've discussed many times the fact that they will, as opposed to our brothers and sisters who went to 3D chambers and really they just wanted to be free of, because again, they were not from the dark. They were people from the middle, people from the light team. They just wanted to enjoy the way that we all would have liked to enjoy this planet, this 3D planet. So they just wanted to continue enjoying 3D reality without all the limitations that have come because of the darkness here, the dark systems. But for the dark, because they were the ones that put in place all these things, they didn't just want a different 3D reality. They wanted to come to grips with what's happened and also realize that, well, I did that because that's what I believed I had to do, or the energy was different, but I'm not this bad person. Because we said many times, they have the same concept of good and bad that we do, because guess what? They're our neighbors. The people from the dark, the people that play the role of the dark are our neighbors, our friends. They're not different from us. And so that's why they made this choice. This was their choice. Of course, they could have done anything else, but this was the underlying interest and the reason why they are going to planets and not losing their memories. And this is very brave, It's been a tough choice. It's tough from a 3D perspective to make this choice, but they can handle it. They decided they can handle it, and that's what they want. Now, truly, and here's where we run into trouble because it's hard to differentiate, talk about different perspectives, different layers. But truly, at a higher self level, there's not even a question about not being able to handle it. Of course, we can handle it. But again, we are still within the game. We're still within the matrix. We also have to contend with the human emotions, right? So they are going there, whether they take their bodies or not, which we already said they're going to be reptilian. They're going to look reptilian. They're going to come to grips with that. They're going to have their human emotions, the emotions that they bring from here, because it's a continuation of their life, just like with us going to New Earth. That's why we're also going to have a hard time for a couple of years while we're going through the integration process of everything that's happened here. But these are choices. Nobody made us. And these are choices that we believe, the ones that have made them believe it's worthwhile. This is what I want to do because I have much to look forward to. They do too. They're going to eventually, when they manage to let go of these feelings of guilt, they will be able to enjoy. There will be much that is good for them that they will benefit from. Lorrayne, I find this fascinating because the overall arching personality traits of a species, quote unquote, that we have created in the reptilians versus the whatever species we are, I find it very fascinating because, and I'm relating this to Star Trek, because I grew up on Star Trek, the reptilians to me represent the race in Star Trek that were more warrior-like, and they had a code of honor. And it seems to me that what you just said is that the reptilians are living in their cultural code of honor and working through this, so that perhaps the games could be more fun for everyone in the future. Me, absolutely. Now, of course, in Star Trek, it's a human production. So of course you would have your good and bad. So we call it warrior-like, etc., etc. Of course, we are warrior-like. We all have dark and light inside of us. We have done our fair share of everything. But yes, in that sense, if you want to think of it as a code of honor or a choice that has been made, at the end of the day, you know, it's the higher self that decides. But the higher self, when it marries, it decides to have a certain NPC as a body. We said it takes on the characters of, you know, it works through the character and the traits of the NPC. So in that sense, yes, you can look at it that way, which is basically they decided this is the next challenge you want to challenge yourselves with. And we know we will overcome it. And of course they will. Now, we are going to help them. But either way, it might take longer, but they will overcome it because this is what they've set themselves up to do. And also to reunite with people like them so they don't have to look a different way. Now, when we say look a different way, we just want to make a distinction. We have already explained this, but we just want to do a little refresher. We don't mean to say, because we know that this is what happens in the conspiracy theory circles, where they say that they shed their skin here, you know, like Visitor, like in Visitors, the show. It's not like they were reptilians here and then they were covering themselves with these fake bodies, human bodies. When we say they're reptilian, we are talking about the game that they play on the team of the dark. And we've said it's the reptilians that have taken on that role of being the team of the dark. But when they do move to their planets, they will believe, oh, I was never human. It was always me underneath, right? Because we already said this information has always been available, but then it gets interpreted within the game. That's why here we have these visuals of really you're reptilian and you have this fake human skin on top of you. They were human. They were human just like us. The NPCs are the same. The NPCs of the dark are still here and they're still just like us. They're not actually reptilians in human skin. We're actually all the same. These are all the same NPCs we have used. But when they moved on, we said they moved on to reptilian planets and they see themselves as a reptilian, just like our brothers and sisters in 3D chambers are seeing themselves as human. And they remember themselves as humans. And they look at the aliens and say, well, yeah, we're all human, right? We talked about how they will actually identify themselves with the aliens because the aliens just have different systems, but they're like us, they're human. And so in the same way, the reptilians will think, oh, this is what we look like, right? This is why I was doing the things I was doing. It was a different energy. And this is why I look this way, etc., etc. They will have their own explanation, but the entire point of this explanation, because again, their information is from within the matrix, will be, we were always meant to be here. We were in a place that wasn't ours. So we behaved in ways that are not ours. Because we've said many times, there are many people on reptilian planets with good and bad inside. And they're balanced planets, so they're much less dark than Earth. We already said Earth is the darkest place that's ever existed in the multiverse. So imagine, we like to think of these reptilian planets as being these dark places and all of that. That's not true. And we only mentioned this because you were mentioning they're warrior-like. So immediately Clea is going to, oh, it's a place where all they do is war. And Sorcerer's chuckling. But it's not. They live their lives. They just look different, but they live their lives. And in fact, they live their lives much more peacefully than we have on this planet. Lorrayne, well, I was referring to the show, and I think it's fascinating how we have in our creative imagination created all of these things. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching as always. Bye-bye.